Hello and welcome to another edition of Around the Table. I'm Stacy Smith. This is where we discuss everything political and sometimes things that aren't political, whatever comes to our mind. Joining me around the table today are former Pennsylvania Governor, Republican Governor Tom Corbett. Governor Corbett also served as State Attorney General, and he also served as U.S. Attorney for Western District of Pennsylvania. Also joining us is Jim Byrne. Jim is the former chairman of the State Democratic Party here in Pennsylvania. He also served as chairman of the Allegheny County Council and also was a longtime mayor of Millvale. He's an attorney in town. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Hello. Good to be with you.
Great to have you. Also, an attorney is Amanda Green Hawkins. She's of counsel to a major union here based in the city of Pittsburgh. Amanda also happens to have on her resume that she was a former national committee woman for the Democratic National Committee and also served on Allegheny County Council. Amanda, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Republican Chris Fry. Chris happens to be the mayor of Newcastle. And there's going to be some interesting comments from Chris a little bit later about the demonstrations that took place in Newcastle as well. I want to thank all of you for joining us. This was supposed to be a week that happened several weeks ago, but it didn't. It happened this week. That's the Pennsylvania primary election. It, like many other states, the primary election was pushed back because of the COVID-19 crisis that we've been dealing with here in this country. But let's start with the primary election. And Jim, I'll start with you. Any surprises on your end?
I was a little surprised by the margin of victory of Congressman Doyle over Jerry Dickinson. I thought that would be a lot closer, and quite frankly, I thought Jerry Dickinson was in a great position to win. So that was a surprise for me. I think that when you're going against an entrenched incumbent, you need as much retail, grassroots, door-to-door as you can get. And in being part of Jerry's campaign, having endorsed him, the end game for that campaign just wasn't able to come to fruition because of the COVID lockdown. So that was a surprise. Other than that, I think we should look at some of the progressive women who ran against incumbents in Allegheny County. Adam Ravenstahl, he lost. There was the Fitzgerald endorsement, not an incumbent against Summer Lee. Summer Lee beat him 4-1, 5-1. It was a good day for progressive women candidates in Allegheny County and across the state. They are showing a roadmap for similar-minded candidates in the future to get elected. But other than that, I think everything was good. I'm very impressed with how well the election was done. Kudos to the director of the Department of Elections at Allegheny County, 40% turnout. There is now, they'll troubleshoot, but I think we now have a path to make this even smoother than it was for the general election. I think a lot of the concerns, well-founded, were alleviated with how well that was run.
Governor, I'm going to bring you in on this one if we can, and that is, the question is to Jim pointed out, how well progressive women are doing right now in the Democratic Party.
Well, it's obvious that they are reaching out to people who are receptive to their points of view, and they're finding voters. And I would say that the people who are losing have been the established Democrats in the party at this point in time. And so you're seeing a shift. And what does that mean overall? I'm not sure yet, but if the party continues to go towards the progressive side, does that give Republicans, from my perspective, a chance? I'm not sure right now. I think it's going to take 2 or 3 cycles to see where that goes. But it's interesting to watch. Nothing really happened on the Republican side that I noticed at all. But I did notice over in Philadelphia, again, some of the incumbent Democrats over there did not win their primaries in the House and maybe even one of the Senate seats. I think Senator Dalen Leach lost in his bid for re-election. So those are big changes to the State House that are going on.
Amanda, from your perspective as a woman, how do you view the fact that progressive women, as Jim pointed out, are garnering at least the nominations, and how well do you think they will be able to go against a challenge on the Republican side?
I think that it reflects this disconnect that we have sometimes witnessed between what people want and perhaps what the party wants. And when the party makes an endorsement of a candidate who is not reflective of the community's wants, needs, perspectives, backgrounds, you're going to have a problem getting your candidate through if that's the case. You have to have your ears on the ground, your ear to the ground, and understand what the community wants and needs. And when we say progressive women candidates, I just call them candidates who listen well, who understand what the issues are, and know where I'm coming from. And that's what people want. They want that connection. Like we said last week, this is about emotion. It's a lot about emotion. And when you have that ability to connect with people, you're going to garner a large following, a large base of support. And that's what they're doing. And as far as going up against the Republicans in the fall, I think that if they stay true to their message and to what they've been doing, that they will not have a problem winning these elections in the fall.
I'm going to have to ask you this question because you pointed out that how these particular candidates are winning right now. But on the flip side of that, as Jim pointed out, on the congressional side, the incumbent did win. And you're saying that sometimes this shows that what the people want and what the party want are two different things. Does it make a difference in the breadth of the election? In other words, how large the district might be? In other words, basically neighborhood politics as opposed to a wider, where you can't knock on every single door in a congressional district?
I think that may have some impact. And if you're speaking particularly about the Doyle and Dickinson race, right? Well, the party did back Doyle, and the community, as we see by the votes, also by a large margin, backed Doyle as well. However, you cannot deny that there is a segment. There are people in that district who do not feel the same way about Doyle or about the party's perspectives. And you have to be able to listen to people and to what they want. And I watched the debate between Doyle and Dickinson that was hosted by the NAACP here in Pittsburgh. And the questions that were being asked, this was the first time that many people in the NAACP felt that they were able to ask these questions and have them answered by the congressman, because he was in that setting and they were able to put those questions forward. So there he was, he had to listen to them. He had to respond to questions. And that's important. It's gonna be important. Now, maybe it helped him garner some more support from members of the NAACP. It is an independent organization, nonpartisan, but they do vote. People who are members do vote. So maybe it helped him, maybe it did not. I'm not sure, but the numbers are there and they are what they are. The voters did decide and we have to respect that.
Mayor Fry, I'd like to bring you in on this one. How do you think the mail-in balloting worked this time?
I think it was appropriate. I saw that the governor extended it for 6 counties in the state. I saw it as an opportunity for votes to get in, for folks. I know there was a lot of negativity behind it, but I didn't see anything wrong with it. I saw it as an opportunity to increase voter turnout. And I say that from a side of that there, younger crowds, busy people. Some even have stigma towards going into the booths. So I thought it was an opportunity, and I like to see what it results to, and I look forward to the information that comes out on if it did increase voter turnout.
Governor, how did you feel about the current governor putting out basically an order that extending the deadline for counting the ballots?
Well, my initial reaction was I wasn't sure he could do it. Then I was reminded that we did it in an emergency situation for areas that were flooded. And one time I think it was a snowstorm that required it on the circulation of the ballot. I'm not sure it was necessary in this one. And I think it could have lent itself, it hasn't, could have lent itself to being criticized if any of the races were close. But I don't think any one of those races were that close that would make a difference in the election. I want to echo what Jim said. I went over to my new polling place, which is a junior high school here in Shaler. They had everybody there. They had it well worked out ahead of time. People were standing outside. Of course, it was June. It wasn't April when it's a little bit colder in November. And walking in and going to different polling places by alphabet for all of the township. And I don't see why that can't work in the future. Rather than having a number of polling places, this is a central location, close to school, it has a lot of parking. I would hope that they would think about doing that in the future.
I agree, Governor. Stacy, crisis always, as unfortunate as they are, but they're inevitable. crises also create opportunity to sometimes rethink paths that we're on. We're in that process now because of COVID. We're all rethinking how we run our businesses, and now we have an opportunity to rethink how we run our elections. Governor, I saw the same thing in Millvale. It's much smaller than Shaler, but all 5 precincts were down at the Millvale Recreation Center. I was working the polls for Jerry Dickinson. The 6th and 9th wards were at the Teamster Hall in Lawrenceville. I went up to Alderdice. There were a few points where there was some bottlenecking, but then when you went inside and looked, they didn't last very long. And there's also a lot of folks concerned over the years about paper trails for the ballots. We have that now. So an opportunity has presented itself. Those who say, I don't feel like walking to the polls, or I'm not sure where my polling place is. A lot of those concerns about people using as being disenfranchised, many of those issues seem to have begun to become alleviated if we stay on this course. There's an opportunity here at PATH to bring out even more people than the 40% we just saw 2 days ago.
I think it's going to allow for greater ballot security also. If those boxes that we put our ballots into are all going to one location and both parties are present and maybe some independents are present, when all of those are being scanned and make sure it's being done right, that gives you better ballot security than what we had before.
Stacy, I pay attention to what you just saw. Governor Corbett and I agreeing on a voting process. I can assure you that a few years ago, we were not necessarily on the same page on a couple of issues, but I think what we saw was a watershed moment of opportunity for bipartisan support, if it continues this way, of an inclusive, verifiable keyword method of voting. Let's hope this continues.
I have to agree with you, Jim, in the fact that over the years, it's been the Republican side who have been apparently opposed most of the time to mail-in balloting.
Well, Stacy, I was talking about going in there in location. On the mail-in side, I still have my concerns until we make sure that it's one person, one vote. And there are so many people, and I'm looking across the country, but here in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of people that are still registered to vote that aren't even living anymore. I think there's a court case, and Jim, you correct me if I'm wrong, there's a court case that they're working to settle for people that are still listed on the voting rolls. They shouldn't be. There should be a way that when somebody dies, a death certificate goes directly to the election bureau, and that person is taken off the rolls. I think Republicans would be very satisfied if they saw something like that happen.
Common sense. It's common sense. I advocated against the voter ID, the photo ID, because I thought the constitutional threshold was too high for it back in the day, Governor, when we went back and forth on that. But I never disagreed with the fact that if you have an opportunity to eliminate the potential for nefarious activity, then by all means do it. And that one's right over the plate. There should be a way to eradicate and eliminate those who have passed expeditiously.
And I would note this, there was a big difference between the western part of the state and the county of Philadelphia. And in fact, in Philadelphia, they've had somebody convicted recently by the federal government, pled guilty to stuffing the ballot box in a primary on behalf of certain candidates running for judge. So we know it does happen. A lot of people would say in the past, oh, that doesn't happen. Yes, it does. And we've got to be able to prevent that.
I've read about bipartisan indictments on that issue as well across the country.
Right.
Well, let's move on to what the results were on the presidential election nomination, at least for Pennsylvania. No surprises. Donald Trump easily won as the Republican nominee for Pennsylvania, at least, and the former Vice President Joe Biden won on the Democratic side. So, how does this look now for these two? I mean, we always say they are the presumptive nominees until there is a convention, and they are indeed the nominees. Are they going to be the nominees this year? No questions?
Short answer for me is Trump will be. 2 weeks ago, when we finished up our segment, I said, I think there's a 50-50 chance Joe Biden isn't the nominee, that somebody else comes in, that they find a reason to put Mr. Biden aside. I'm changing that opinion now based really upon what's gone on in the last week and a half. He will be. He performed well yesterday. And I think the president has hurt himself tremendously for re-election in his last actions of a week and a half.
If
Governor.
you look at it, Vice President Biden needs just under 2,000 delegates for the nomination, and I think he already has somewhere over 1,900. So he's very close, and I think it's just a matter of the next few primaries, and I think we'll have our nominee sealed for the Democratic Party. Now, we do have to go to the convention, and anything can happen, but I don't foresee any issues.
Well, let's
As I always say, is Lord willing.
Right.
but let's move on to what the governor just also mentioned about this past week and the demonstrations and how both of the nominees are handling it. Governor, you've just expressed your opinion on that. Jim, what's yours?
I agree with Governor Corbett. In a time of crisis, it is incumbent upon the executive at any level of government to sow the seeds of calm, sow the seeds of unison, find common ground, take the temperature down in the room. And people look to that executive, irrespective of party affiliation. George W. Bush was at 91% after 9/11 because he calmed the nation. We're not seeing that now from Donald Trump. His own party has begun to criticize him more aggressively than I've seen in the last 3 years. The tweet about when the looting starts, the shooting starts, I don't care what anybody is trying to spin that he didn't know where that came from. That was from a racist sheriff in 1968 who turned dogs and guns on protesters. So he knew what he was doing. This horrific murder of a man in Minnesota is a culmination of the race baiting that this man has done for the last 3 years. And now that his party is starting to see it as well, he has, but back to the point, Stacy, he has mismanaged that crisis, that tragedy, that murder in an unprecedented fashion. He is throwing gas on fires when he should be bringing water, calm, and unity. He does not know how to do it. General Mattis, who he once admired, who Trump once admired, eviscerated him last night in an op-ed. That speaks volumes on how he's handled this. And he has done nothing for the last 4 days but just attack on Twitter. Attack, 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 instead of unite, unite, unite. He himself is squandering his chances for re-election every day.
I'd like to bring in Mayor Fry on this one because Mayor, A, you're a current elected official. B, you are African American, and C, you are a Republican. Your comments following what Jim just said.
You know, I understand, and I agree with you. The executive needs to calm everybody down, give peace in the community. And I'll be honest with you, I've been on the ground all week, this week and last week, working with the organizers of protests who were very outraged at what took place with Mr. George Floyd. So I haven't been on social media. I haven't seen the news or anything recently to see what President Trump is doing. But what I have been able to do is to lead and try to be vocal to some of our local leaders who I know are Republican and Democrat to help try to figure out what we need to be doing to support, these types of protests and ensure that they're peaceful. And I can say from my end, if that is what President Trump, if he didn't take the proper approaches, that's disheartening. But I know that there's resources out there and people out there that know that he should be reaching out to. And I heard it from the mouths of folks in his administration when I was in D.C., Washington, D.C. in January. They just wish that they can have a little bit more control or support when it comes to what he puts out on social media. And the filter's not there. And I think that's where the lapse is. He absolutely has no filter. And that's the problem, especially when it comes to somebody that's leading our nation.
Amanda?
Stacy, this is somewhat personal for me. I was around 4 or 5 years old, somewhere around my daughter's age now, when a family friend, 19 years old, young Black man, was unarmed, shot in the back, and paralyzed by police. And I was somewhere around my son's age, he's 9 now, when I witnessed police knock to to Hispanic men off of a moped and then begin to beat them with batons and kick them brutally. So these are things I've seen my entire life. I've witnessed them. And to have a person who is supposed to be the leader of this nation show no compassion, show no humanity to soothe an injured nation is beyond disheartening. It breaks my heart that he cannot step up into that leadership role at this time. And not only that, something else I witnessed in my lifetime is the Tiananmen Square that everybody keeps talking about, where the military was put on its own citizens who were protesting, using their voices to oppose something. And he's now saying that he's going to send the military in on Americans, on citizens exercising their First Amendment right. Stacy, I can't even begin to wrap my head around this in light of all the pain that I've experienced in my life and the pain that we are collectively experiencing now. And to face this or to even address this, because it's like futile to try to address this because we have so many more, much more important things that we need to focus on. So it's like we don't even have time to deal with this president at this time.
I would like to turn it just slightly in this way. I'm going to bring the mayor back in again. Mayor, you've had two demonstrations, two protest marches in Newcastle. Do they make a difference, or does it change the attitudes of elected officials or police departments?
They absolutely make a difference. And I think they make a difference for multiple reasons. One being engagement. It shows that you're active and it's something has sparked the nerve to make you come out and be active. And the other reason is that it gets you, hopefully it drives some momentum into the next phase of whatever may be coming up on whether it's an election, whether it's voting or, some stuff that voting in from city council. I think it gives that momentum, and it also brings out new faces. So I saw tons of people that I had never seen, in our community that actually come forth and speak up. Now, some of the downfalls of it is that they have the high potential of just being spontaneous and then they end at the end. But it's the local leaders, and that's where, to your other point of your question, that's where we come in terms of police officers and leaders of the community, elected officials, to continue those conversations. Is social unrest and social justice important to us? Absolutely. Just as important as our economic situation. The more violence and the more crimes we have in the community, we all know that that's an indicator for that pushes business and opportunity away from our city. So we absolutely don't want these things to happen in our community. But it is our job, even if the baton is dropped by some of the organizers of the groups that are doing it, it is our job to pick that baton up and continue it on. And both myself, and I can speak for Newcastle, both myself and our police chief were very encouraged by what took place. And we're going to try to, and I just talked to a group earlier, we're going to try to put that into just our overall plan for the city, just this diversity, inclusion, and how do we keep folks, give them access to what's going on. And again, like I mentioned about the mail-in votes, not everybody, just like folks community members won't call the police when something bad happens, people don't feel right to go into a booth and vote. And that's just the reality of it. We have to, at some point we have to diversify our political system, our election system so people can feel more open to doing it. And that's what we're trying to do from the inside.
We only have about a minute and a half or so to go. Governor and Jim, I'm going to bring the two of you back in on this one. And that the question then is, if a lot of people feel this disappointment, some people feel outrage over the president, will this carry over into the fall election?
It's a long time between now and Election Day. You would anticipate that it would at this point in time, but you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, there could be another event that would cause sympathy to go one way or the other. If the election is tomorrow, absolutely has an impact on the election. But November, what day is it? 4th or something like that this year?
Right.
Third is a long time away. And in politics, that's a lifetime.
It is. I agree, Governor. If it were tomorrow, he's in deep trouble. But, everybody's been waiting for 3.5 years. He'll right the ship. He'll get his act together. He'll start to behave in a presidential executive fashion. He hasn't done it. With him, it's always been one step forward. Wow, did you hear what he just said? Did you see what he just did? Finally. And then it's 5 steps back a minute later when he does a vociferous tweet. I think he will continue this self-immolation and self-destruction all the way to the general election.
The one thing that normally happens, though, when you have an event like this, if you're a candidate, not like him, but when it comes to fundraising, your fundraising starts to dry up. His fundraising is not going to dry up. He can write his own checks in this. But at the same time, his fundraising, his believers are going to continue to contribute to that. So it's not going to come down to whether he has enough money in a campaign. For somebody like Vice President Biden, money's important to get into the campaign. And I don't think he's going to have a problem with that either, because of the passion that the president has created on the other side of the aisle.
Very quickly, I'd like to bring up, I find it almost ironic, the fact that Joe Biden was being criticized just last week over his comments about if you don't vote for me, basically you're not black, and then the tables have turned now on the president on almost the same race issue.
Mr. Biden followed up with a statement, an apology, and again, and we talked with specificity on the last segment about the dynamic of the program that he was on when he said that. That is a separate universe from when the looting starts, the shooting starts, and then gassing innocent protesters to walk through a park and hold a Bible upside down. 2 different universes.
And at the same time, Stacy, we also have Vice President Biden talking with the community about what he intends to do, which is what they want to hear. So he is answering their questions and talking to them.
All right, I want to thank all of you for being with us again for Around the Table. Very interesting discussion. And as I like to say, politics affects what happens, and what happens affects politics. And I think we've seen that this week with the primary election and also the demonstrations and the protests. So thanks all of you for being with us. We hope to see you again next week on Around the Table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, I don't have a lot of time. We got 2.5 minutes here, so if anybody wants to just throw it out. I thought it was a good discussion. Did you guys like it?
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
It's good.
Good. Could have been long. I always feel like we don't have enough time, right? To really go in depth. Yeah. It's like maybe we could do a series. I don't know. Yeah.
Part of the problem is I started the recording a little late. I mean, as you pointed out, Amanda, last week, the clock starts ticking as soon as we start before we even hit record. So that's part of the issue that we had this week. And I'm sorry to see Chris already left us. I thought Chris had some good comments today as well.
He did.
The sitting mayor.
Well, part of why it went so well is we had 2 less people.
No, there's some truth to that.
And one of them, my colleague Keith, talks a lot.
Yeah. I didn't say that, but you did.
I did. I'm going to have a conversation. He tends to go on and on and on.
Yeah.
Stacy, last night around 10 to 8, 5 to 8, I got a notification for CBSN that they were going to promote one of John's interviews, or tune in a few minutes and watch John talk to Mike Pence or something like that. Are they teasing this out?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Okay.
This is a problem. If we're not recording, the powers that be that run.
But you are recording.
Huh?
You are recording.
You are recording.
Yeah.
God, I hope the hell we recorded the other thing.
Yeah, you did.
It's been on.
Yeah, you did.
We've been running.